Hello and welcome to Ways to Change the World. I'm Krishnan guru-murthy, and this is the podcast in which we talk to extraordinary people about the big ideas in their lives and the events that have helped shape them. My guest this week has lived through the most extraordinary events of the 20th century. Tova Friedman was one of the youngest survivors of the Auschwitz death camp at the end of the Second World War. Her family came from Poland, went through various concentration camps, and she ended up in Auschwitz. But remarkably, both her and her mother and her father, who had been separated earlier, all ended up surviving and came back together. And she has written an extraordinary history of her time and her life called The Daughter of Auschwitz, together with the journalist Malcolm Brabant. And she's here with her grandson, Aaron, who is also taking her story to a new generation through the medium of TikTok. Tova, thank you very much for coming. Why is it so important to you to tell your story this way?
Well, first of all, talking is not the same like writing. When it's on paper, it takes much more thought. And you think in the quiet time, and all these things come up. So that's a different quality to writing than you just standing up and just talk to whatever happens. And especially now, when I think the world, for some reason, hasn't been listening, really. Anti-Semitism and hatred, the world is divided all over again. What's going on? And I thought it was timely now. And also, I found the right person to work with.
Do you believe people are forgetting?
Absolutely. Absolutely. Either they're forgetting or they didn't listen to begin with.
You were so young.
Yes.
You've written a very detailed account. How do you remember so much?
Well, you know, that's interesting. First of all, I was with my mother a lot. And she was the kind of person, when I said, is that true, that so forth? She said, yes. What do I smell? What is the smell? She would say, it's the smell of the burning flesh. In other words, she felt that by knowledge, I'll be protected, that I have to know about my environment. So when she says to me, you better hide now, I would do it. Or right now you're not in danger, relax, I would do it. In other words, she taught me reality, and that's why I remember so much.
And she and your father didn't hide the likelihood of you being killed?
Absolutely. In fact, I expected to until the very last minute. Now, I didn't really understand it, but I knew the basics. If you're Jewish, you have to die. That was everybody around me was dying, and they were only Jews. And I didn't even know what Jewish was, but I knew that it's something you have to die for. That's since I was a year old, until the year of, from 1 to 6.5, that was my reality.
I mean, children at that age always ask why. Did you ask why?
So.
I mean,
yeah.
Why do they hate me? Why do they want to kill me?
No, I didn't, because I thought, don't forget, I never went to school. I never thought about anything. I didn't have any thoughts of looking around the world and wondering what's going on. From the moment that I was conscious of life, there was hiding and shooting and starvation. I heard all these things. It was like, that's what this is. That's what my planet, my part of the world, that's what it is.
You say you think people haven't been listening or they're forgetting. So you've been doing really interesting things to make sure that a young generation don't. You've been going on social media, on TikTok.
Well, that's
due to your grandson, Aaron.
That's my wonderful grandchild, my grandson. He's been doing wonders. I had no name. My name was 27,633. I was tattooed by a young woman whose hands trembled because she wasn't happy to tattoo children. And it makes me feel that when I'm not here, at my age, you know, I don't know how long I have, so that the story will continue because of, of my grandson and people like that, because he's reached millions, millions.
Yeah, I mean, the Tova Friedman TikTok account has had millions and millions of views. So, Aaron, how did that happen?
Well, it all started when I noticed that my school wasn't really focused on the Holocaust and educating the students, and they didn't know much. So I saw people use TikTok, and I decided to go on TikTok and post some videos about the Holocaust because she's a survivor, and I believe people need to hear her story. So I started there, and from there, it started to grow and got bigger.
And they're quite simple, aren't they?
Yes. So attention span nowadays are relatively short, and it's just getting shorter. So the videos we do are about 1 minute to 2 minutes long, and that's about it.
What sort of things have you addressed?
We answer questions that people ask. We tell her stories. Really anything that has to do with the Holocaust, Judaism, and anti-Semitism, we try our best to hit every topic.
Do you go on that, on TikTok and look at it?
No, no. There would be too many. I would spend my whole time on. I didn't even know about TikTok until he told me.
How easy do you find it to tell the story, though, when you've told it so many times?
You know, they say that, well, I say I don't have survivor's guilt, but I do have survivor's obligation. I don't know why I was chosen by the universe or by God or whatever you want to be alive against all odds. When people like myself were all killed, 1.5 million Jewish children were murdered, I feel I have an obligation to tell their story because it's not just my story. It wouldn't be important enough if it's just one person. I'm a representative of all the children that didn't make it. And I want to make sure that the world knows about those children, because I remember some of them.
Social media is obviously polarized. What kinds of reactions have you had? I mean, I presume it's not all been positive.
Yeah, so we get a lot of comments ranging from support, thanking us for helping them see this new, or showing them new ideas. But there has been a lot of anti-Semitism from people saying Hitler was right, to that he should have killed more. Just really bad stuff, but I try to censor most of it so she doesn't have to relive that.
Well, what do you think of that?
I won't
modern
listen.
day anti-Semitism?
I will not. I've asked him to do me a favor, not to expose me to that. I can't talk to revisionists or to haters. I can only tell the story and hope for them to understand, to prevent it. If I get bogged down with all that ugliness, it'll be too hard for me. So he's a wonderful person, and he keeps them from me. He says, well, you got some hate mail, but I'm not going to show it to you.
But what do you think it tells you about us, about human beings, that you had your experience and that, you know, so many years on, you tell your story and you encounter
I want to
anti-Semitism.
tell you something. That if I looked at what's going on now, do you know there's someplace in the world that somebody's killing somebody all the time? Statistically, every 20 seconds somebody is killed for some reason. And I don't mean hoodlums, I mean for religion or for something politically, okay? And someplace in the world there's a hungry child with dying of starvation. We know that. If I looked at it, it would make you feel that it's all worthless. But I can't do that. I don't allow myself to do that. It's very frightening what happens, and I'm wondering about our human nature. But I really hope that there is the good side, and I try to speak to that side of human beings. We're both terrible, wonderful, and wonderful. I'd like to, key into this wonderful side of us.
How does it make you feel, Aaron?
I can't imagine someone watching her videos and posting negative comments about what they just saw. There were people murdered for being Jewish and other reasons. But it's crazy that someone can see the terrible stuff that happened and continue to do that in modern times, what we know today.
I mean, you talk about being a survivor. I mean, can we talk a little bit about how you are a survivor? I mean, you actually went into the gas chambers, and you've written about that.
I don't know. Many of us who survived, I have to say it's luck. I can't believe that I was chosen for any reason. We weren't smarter, we weren't richer. I know that my parents worked very hard, tried to hide me when it was most dangerous, and talk to me.
I mean, what's extraordinary about your story, though, is that not only did you survive, but your mother and father as well.
We were separated, and my mother found me, and so we were liberated in Auschwitz. We were positive my father was dead. And a year later or so, he came from Dachau. He came. We all went back to where the whole thing began. We all went back. It was an unwritten appointment all over Europe. Every single person, when they were liberated, every single person went back to the town where he saw his family last. And nobody said, I'll see you here nobody said the goodbye, I'll see you in 2 or 3 years. No, but they all gravitated home, what used to be called home. And my mother didn't find anybody that came back for her.
You've talked about how what happened to you in the concentration camps has defined your life since, as you would expect it to.
Absolutely.
What was your life before?
I didn't have one.
Your family's life?
Oh, well, my mother came from a very Orthodox family, Jewish, of course, very Orthodox. My father was more of a free thinker. They got married, and they left the town where their families were to try to open up new opportunities. Young couple, and they went to Danzig. Now, Danzig was are you familiar with the town? International port. In fact, they had they spoke only mostly German, but there were enclaves of Jews. They had a fabulous synagogue there. It was a place that my father thought they're going to begin, and he opened up a business as a young man with a young wife, and then I was born there.
And a young family.
And a very young family.
But soon you ended up in the ghetto.
Yeah, well...
What was the ghetto, and what was life there?
Ooh. You know, the ghetto was the beginning of the slaughter. And the slaughter started the moment the Germans entered a town. In my town, I think they came Tomaszow Mazowiecki, I'm not sure, 1940 or 41, something, in the beginning. The first thing they did, they put all the Jews, they designated a place so they could have control over it. So we had to wear, wear a blue and a Jewish star. Everybody had to wear it. And then they had a card that said Jude, Jew, on it. And you all lived together in that ghetto so they can come and slaughter us easily. They didn't have to find us. They knew where we were. So the first thing they did, they shot most of the elderly. Either shot them, deported them, starved them. There were very few elderly left, and the children.
Do you remember any of that?
I remember only when my grandma was taken. She lived with us for a little bit, and then she was shot. That was my mother's mother, my father's mother, and mother and father. I remember that very well. My father came in one day, and he said, I just put them on the truck. And we knew what that meant. And that was the first time he was crying. The second time he was crying when we were separated to go to Auschwitz. And I knew what it was. They had taken all the elderly, and they had made graves, and they shot them in the back while they were facing the graves. Yeah, I remember that very, very well, because I heard my father say that, and they didn't tell me to go away. They exposed me to the world that I had to understand in order to be safe. That was their philosophy.
How did you get sent from the ghetto to the first of the camps? Because you went from camp to camp.
Yeah, the camp, there were less of those people in that camp. Every ghetto, after they've murdered most of the people, or whoever was left, they had a special concentration camp. Our ghetto went to Treblinka. Treblinka was a death camp. 8,000 people, and there were very few left, and we were the cleanup squad.
What does that mean?
It's interesting. During the Nuremberg trials, they did not lie, some of them, when they said, I never killed a Jew. I never did. Not with their own hands. They gave orders. So you can't say that my hands are dirty. I didn't shoot you. I told him to shoot you. So when they killed the masses of the Jews, they never picked up the bodies. We did it. They had people like us, not me, but my father and mother. I was a kid, I was about 5 years old, would take out the bodies and put them into not even a cemetery, just cover up the graves. There were these gigantic communal graves that were maybe as big as the studio or something deep. So so we were left to clean up, because you know what? It's interesting. Somewhere in the back of their minds, they knew that what they're doing, they'll have to pay for it. I just want to tell you, because why? They said no witnesses. Now, why did Hitler have this policy? Leave no witness. Why? If you're doing everything, what's wrong with witnesses, right? So leave no witnesses. It means not only people, but leave no trace, no blood on the floor, no blood on the beds. So what they did, people like us, there were like 36 people. There was a question how many people were left. Nobody remembered. My father said 50, other people said 30, a bunch. For months, all they did was take away all the signs. So if somebody were ever to say, you were a mass murderers, look what you did, they will say, prove it. There was nothing there. So my mother would go and fix the sheets, take the sheets. Maybe they had to be washed if there was blood. The ground was clean. They whitewashed their crimes by using the Jews, so that we covered up the death of our own people.
There's so much detail in both your interviews online and in the book, but I mean, I do want to ask you a little bit about life in Auschwitz, life and death, because it was all around you, wasn't it?
Yes.
I mean, what are your strongest memories?
Remember, I was a child. If you ask a teenager, it would be different. If you ask my mother, she never talked about it to me. After the war, she couldn't talk about it. It would be completely different. You have to understand that hunger is what permeated our lives. Hunger. The kind of hunger there's no way to describe it. None. I tried to tell it to my grandkids. You know, you're hungry because you didn't have lunch or something. But that kind of a hunger that your whole mind and body thinks about food. So we didn't have much energy, and we were kids. So it didn't consist of anything.
You have talked about how starvation, you believe, was being used.
Absolutely.
To thin the population.
Absolutely. They used many methods. The gas chambers were the final solution, where they didn't have enough time. They got to worry. You see, the war lasted longer than expected. Hitler got worried. Wait a minute, you mean they're still alive? No, we've got to get rid of it. So they started the experiments, 42, 43, in how quickly the people can be gassed. Like they had these, how many, if you have 100 people, how much gas do you need? How fast? It was, in the beginning, it was 20 minutes for maybe 500 people. After that, it became 10 minutes. You know, more and more and more. And then, if they didn't have fast enough, the gas chambers weren't fast enough, starvation did it. Every morning, I'd get up, and there were kids that died during the night. I knew they would die. I was sleeping with a 12-year-old girl. I knew when she was going to die. I could, you know, at our age, at 6, 7, a little bit older maybe, kids would say, look at him or look at her. We knew the signs of starvation, how it starts, the back of your head, and how much ribs show. You could almost predict how soon a person will die. So starvation was one of the weapons.
Were you afraid?
No. What do you mean by afraid? I thought I just knew that that's the way you're supposed to live and die. Didn't know why, because I didn't know what Jewish was, but why? And it was just a matter, I'll tell you what I was afraid of being punished for doing something. That I could feel, being hit, deprived of a piece of bread. That is what I was afraid of. Death I wasn't afraid of. Didn't even know what it was. And I know we all will die anyhow. It's just a matter of time.
So you weren't afraid of death because
Not of death, no. It's hard to say, you know. I'm not sure that people understand what death is. I mean, you're asking me now if I'm afraid of death. I'm 84. I can't even think about it. I can't picture me not being here anymore, forever. It's a philosophical thing. Kids didn't think like that.
You were sent into a gas chamber.
Yeah.
But
I remember being there.
Can you tell me what happened that day?
That day in the morning, we were told, you're getting something special. Oh, we knew it right away because the barrack next to us was empty of children. So I knew that they went to the gas chamber. And I knew they wouldn't come back. But I knew also that they got something very good to eat. That's all I cared about. And in the morning, we got something sweet, something wet. It was like a porridge, like something. Oh, it was like pure heaven.
With no explanation why?
We knew. We're clever. Kids, this is what I'm trying to tell. Kids know much more than anybody thinks. Kids are like animals. They feel it. You feel it that something is going on in a household. We knew something was happening, and it did. But who cared? We were eating. And then they took us, and they took us to the gas chambers.
What happened?
You want to know the whole story? Well, we were walking down, freezing. That's I remember. See, a kid remembers physical. My shoes were just, maybe I didn't even have some kind of rags for shoes. And then I heard a voice calling my name. Nobody called my name. I was a number. And I said, oh, it's my mother. And she said, where are you going? And I said, to the gas chambers. It was as if we're going for a walk. That you're supposed to do that. The other barracks went already. So they were screaming, and all the women, there were other women, they had children among my group. I remember turning to the person next to me, little girl, and I said, why are they crying? Don't all Jewish children go to the gas chamber? What is this noise they're making? So we went, and we went down the steps, and there's a gigantic room. I think it was cement. And there were like numbers all around, so you could like hang up your clothes. But I couldn't read the numbers, so I didn't know what they were. But they did announce, hang up your clothes, so when you come out after the showers, you will find them. Since I couldn't read the numbers, I looked at the person next to me. If I recognize her shoes, I'll recognize my shoes. And hung up whatever, and then we waited. We were naked. The cold. We were given some kind of towels, but they weren't really. They were rags. They were like threadbare. Just the older kids were crying. We were just so cold, and we stood together. All the little kids shivering, and then we heard screaming and yelling, which I didn't understand. I think it was in German or I don't know what. And then they told us to get dressed. I thought it was the rag transport. That was my understanding. They were walking around with all kinds of papers and they were checking off, you know, they're very organized. And apparently it was the wrong group. That's what I heard.
I mean, in the book, you also say that you think that may have been the day Himmler ordered a stop.
That's what Malcolm, the co-writer, because I didn't do research on it. He also couldn't figure it out. It's a miracle. We don't know why we came back. I didn't know. So he thinks maybe that.
You've said a few times now you didn't know what being a Jew was.
Yeah, I didn't understand it.
What is being a Jew to you now?
Oh, I learned a lot. I love Judaism. I study Judaism every day. Every morning, I listen to a wonderful rabbi on Zoom. I began to study. I said, after the war, I said, what is this? What was it? So in a DP camp, Israel sent a lot of teachers, and they began teaching us about Judaism, about Israel, about in a camp where the kids came from everywhere, without parents, with parents, orphans. They began to teach us about our people. And since then, I fell in love with this. I just came from Israel 2 weeks ago.
I saw one interview with you in which you talked about your father praising God with the dead.
I didn't understand what he was
and
saying.
you didn't understand that?
No. But when I grew up, I thought to myself, how can he praise God during this kind of a period?
And do you still think that? How do you feel about God and the Holocaust?
What's a question? I've been struggling with God for a long time. You know, Jewish holidays are coming up. One of the biggest holidays, Yom Kippur. Are you familiar with Yom Kippur? We are supposed to stand and say, I sinned, forgive us, God. I have trouble with that. I said, what did I sin? What did I do? To have lost my mother early because she lost everybody. I have no family, except the one that I made myself, which is a blessing. But you know what I said to God? I have a deal with you. It's very emotional. I said to him, I'll tell you what, I will ask you for forgiveness. If you ask me for forgiveness, I think he owes us an explanation and ask us for forgiveness. That's what I feel. Very unorthodox.
What do you think the power is of this story for your generation?
I'm hoping the next generations will hear the story, listen to it, and understand where hate can lead to if it's unchecked. You can't be a bystander. If you see something that needs to be changed in society, then you stand up for it and change it, or stand up against it and change it. I'm hoping that people hear her story and fight against anti-Semitism and other forms of hate that exist in the world today.
What is your hope?
Very much like Aaron, in the sense that what I want to also say is that I didn't wake up one day in Auschwitz. Doesn't happen like that. It took years and years and years and years and years before you end up at the final solution. And I just hope that because of his type of awareness, what he's been doing, people will wake up earlier before the final solution, because there were many years that Hitler could have been stopped. Way 10 when he wrote Mein Kampf. That's I think it was in 1924. That took a lifetime before he carried out exactly what he said he would. Where was everybody? And I hope that with him reaching 50 million young people, 50 million, that's what Aaron did. that there'll be somebody and say, hey, wait, we can't let this go on. Look what happened. And people like that, if there's more people like Aaron doing that and listening, maybe we'll never get to a final solution for anybody, not only Jews, but anyone in the world.
Sadly, we don't have time to go into your life after the war and why you ended up in America. But I mean, I do just want to end with this idea that this is contemporary, isn't it? So when you look at other conflicts in the world, you know, when you look at Ukraine and Russia, when you look at Ethiopia.
Yeah, I know. It's scary.
What do you think?
I don't know. Will humanity ever learn? Are we going to destroy everything? And there's going to be nobody left? I mean, at least in Ukraine, there's media and there's sympathy for them. But I don't, maybe your program, so everybody maybe if everybody did what you did, what you do on television, and what Aaron, maybe someplace somebody will, maybe the majority will take up a crusade to stop all that somehow before we destroy each other completely. Very scary, very upsetting.
Tova Friedman and Aaron, thank you both very much.
Thank you.
Thank you.